National champion, winning head coach at the Tennessee Volunteers, Tony Vitello, is with us on Dugouts, Dumbbells, and Dingers. Tony, so much to get to here and featuring your program, to your ascension, the Vols' ascension to the top of the college baseball mountain this past season. And really, it's been a rise over the last few years. But I don't think there's any better spot for us to start with you than asking, what was it like walking out with Morgan Wallen at Neyland Stadium?
Yeah, an adrenaline rush, that's for sure. A little bit surreal. And then, the main part was kind of felt like I was on babysitting duty, because I know there'd be a lot of people on TikTok that follow Morgan and anything he does. So we didn't need one of our guys doing something foolish or a little too over the top, or, in this day and age, anything can be perceived as being anti whatever. So it went well. And it's so cool being in that stadium. The crowd there is always rowdy and always loud, and it's a huge number of people, but it's very different than a football game at an event like that. So it was pretty cool seeing the difference and experiencing it.
Well, it was incredible for me as a fan. I know Khan is a fan as well, but to see all those images and to be following your program as closely as we have over the last few years and since you took over, for y'all to have that moment, it was kind of like a celebration again, much like, the rally following what had ensued at the end of June, and combined with Morgan Wallen and comedian Theo Von. I saw you at an East Tennessee food bank here most recently, early in October, helping with donations as part of Hurricane Helene relief. Why was that so important for you, and what was that moment like?
Yeah, I think at any point where people are devastated like that, you almost immediately, everybody in the country becomes more fortunate than those people, even people who have very little. So there's a nice trickle down effect I think we have in society, where a guy like Peyton is such a great host. And part of it is he can take care of so many people because of who he is. So whoever you are, when you have that opportunity, maybe you're just a junior in college and you have a chance to take care of a freshman, you should do it. So that was a part of it. But also, since we've been here, we've learned how you cannot understate how much the power team means to these people in this state. And if you're a part of it in any way, shape, or form, in particular, if you're an athlete, it means a lot. So just to show up, I think, was important. And then the fact we've got manpower where our guys can deliver goods, can help with certain things physically, that was an added bonus as well.
Is Theo Von as funny in real life in person as he is with all the content he pushes out?
So, he hangs with Caleb Presley too. And I mean, Caleb, that's a character that he's put together in those interviews, which are just incredibly hilarious. But I was shocked at just how chill. He's still funny, but how just great of a dude he is and how chill. Opposite of Theo is like that all the time. And I think that's when he was able to tap into his first acting and then became comedic career, was just being true to himself. And I think it's a good little lesson that authentic and vulnerable and being honest is kind of the way to go. So we've even used him as an example with our players. But I'll tell you what, that dude is just down to his soul, is just a great person. And he is absolutely hilarious. Your cheeks will hurt if you hang around him for more than 30 seconds.
That's awesome to hear. We've talked about a lot that's happened since Tennessee claimed its first ever college baseball national championship, but it's only been a little more than 4 months since that dog pile in Omaha. When you think back on last year's accomplishments, the national title, the 60-win season, the SEC championships, regular season, and the tournament, and really more, what stands out the most to you?
I just think how well that team got along. And I don't just mean the players, but the coaches, the support staff, and there was just a go-between. And there was never, ever really a moment of true strife or panic or discontent. Of course, when you're competing, there's fiery moments and things like that. But everybody just seemed to be looking out for one another, and everyone wanted to keep pushing towards a goal. And you can't coach that. You can't do that, in a short amount of time. It takes time. And I think a big part of that time was just our building as a program, but also the building up of the characters that were involved, like Xander, Kirby, Hunter Ensley, Simo, and Burke. They had experienced so much in their careers prior to that year. I think it truly played into it, even though, again, it was in the past and maybe even a part of a different season.
I love that you start right off the bat with how cohesive this team was, because you mentioned so many of the personalities that are on this team. And sometimes you wonder, can they all mesh well? But they certainly did. We experienced that in Hoover. We had Xander on the podcast right after you guys won it all in Omaha and saw his just uniqueness as an understatement when you talk about Xander. So I love that you mentioned all that. But take us through the moment of the dog pile. And then afterwards, was there anything specific you did that evening after the lights had dimmed and you were back at the hotel to kind of reflect on this national title?
Yeah. So when we got the last out, I started to run. I didn't know what to do. And literally, I mean, people use blackout and the word amazing and stuff too freely these days. But I honestly, my brain stopped working. I started towards the mound and I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not a player. And then, although there's been some iconic images of guys like Wayne Graham and the legendary Pat Casey running out, but I turned around to the coaches and they were piled up. So I full force. And I think Frank's glasses cut, when I hit the pile of coaches, his glasses cut his forehead. So I screwed that up among many other things after that, but I did have some fun. I just didn't know what I was really doing. And then we got back to the hotel finally, and that scene was incredible. People everywhere. And you're kind of in business mode. So I had pushed off a lot of the personal relationship stuff, friends that have come, former teammates, family. And it was finally time to relax and have true peace and just get to be with those people. And it was a lot of fun. Don't get me wrong, but it was also a lot of handshaking, almost like I've never been married, but I've seen weddings where I'm like, I don't know if they're having that much fun. They're just going around having to shake everyone's hands. So it was a little bit of that. And then I did my best about 4 times to reenact Hunter Ensley's slide into home. And I'll be damned if somebody didn't, I think, video that. And I know it got out somehow, but no one needed to see that lack of athleticism. And then I'll tell you what, just to give you a little insight, one thing I did do, finally took a shower, came back down, and I told there's about 4 buddies. I said, hey, you guys got to do me a favor. Just stay up long enough when this is like kind of the formal thing is over with. Can we just go up into the room and just sit and kind of, marinate in the whole thing a little bit and talk? You guys tell me about your experience. And we got the trophy sitting right there. And there's so many nights you sit in a hotel room by yourself as a coach and frustrated about a loss, or even if you win, you're kind of like, what's next? And just kind of wanted that moment in a hotel room to have companionship and then also to just feel good and to have peace of mind about where you're at least for that moment.
That's beautiful. Con will ask about some of the personnel and certainly the exhibition games that you're coming off, but just to kind of close the loop on that moment in June 24th and the dog pile, because it takes me back to 2022. I was on the field with you after when you won the SEC tournament championship in Hoover, and I was studying you for a good 5 to 10 minutes before I was able to corral you. A little radio guy weasels in on the field to get his couple of minutes with you, but I'm watching you after 2012 and that title in Hoover, and you just stand there on the top step. You take it all in. You have that very relaxed, subdued demeanor to you where, there's not an ill will in the world. You're just watching your team. You're appreciating the moment. This was stark contrast, obviously. The stakes were much bigger. This is the national championship. I mean, all hell was breaking loose on the field. But I'm thinking of that as I'm watching on television. I'm like, to know where you've taken this program, where we were just a couple of years ago for a team that did fall short in 2012, then to come all the way back on this sort of redemption tour, really was, I appreciated that because the way you operate, I feel like you might be one of the more misunderstood people, and certainly your team and all of this sport. And we might come back to that, but the fans in the hotel, describe them for me. The volunteer fan representing the Block T who pours so much into this program in every sport. I mean, how differently wired is a Tennessee volunteer fan?
They are. And one thing starts with not necessarily an argument about who's better out of the, in the Southeast in particular, the population is big. So that starts it off. There's just a lot of people. and then they just want so badly to be a part of things, and they want to let you know their story and where their loyalty started and why it's so strong. And then, in the victories, they certainly want to take part of the celebration and just get, a brief moment with a player or whatever it might be. And I think we're blessed too. I told a recruit's father last night, toxicity is a word that exists with all fan bases because we're all front runners to some extent. And I just feel like we're blessed with a group that, they'll get frustrated if we don't play well, but I don't think it gets to that toxic environment. So we're appreciative too. And so it's not just them, it's a going back and forth that Kirby probably personifies it as well as anybody. But I really feel like there's kind of a cool marriage going on between our personalities from the dugout and the personalities that attend these games, and the numbers keep growing, whether they're Tennessee residents or just people in Nebraska or whatever. And you couldn't move in that hotel. So we kind of took over a second floor space that kind of became our area, and the cops came. And I'll have to send you guys the picture if you want. Remind Sean, it's a pretty good pic. Fortunately, they cooperated based off the circumstances, and no one was doing anything, it wasn't wild, but it was a lot of people.
That's awesome.
That's fantastic. Just kind of closing the loop here on the 2024 team is Tony Vitello joins us on Dugouts, Dumbbells, and Dingers. You had 8 draft picks through the first 10 rounds in July, an NCAA record. Semo, Burke, Amick, Dreiling, Beam, Tears, Causey, Combs, and then Xander and Cal get signed as free agents. So a whole host of guys now getting a chance to play at the next level. How do you attempt to replace the massive holes left by these guys? And we mean massive, because if you've seen the biceps on Semo and Tears and Dreiling, I mean, those dudes are yoked. So how do you try and replace that?
Yeah, to make it worse, those guys are all hitting on our field right now. So I looked out my window and decided to come downstairs, which is why I'm down here now. But home runs, replacing the home runs is the thing that Coach A and Coach Elander kept bringing up. It's a lot of home runs, but definitely important for those guys to realize you're not Xander, you're not Cal. Those are guys you don't replace. You just make sure you don't have blind spots. And I feel like the personnel is strong enough that if we do have a blind spot, there's only 1 or 2, and guys just need to improve to fill it. But what is an area that needs to be addressed is the leadership. I mean, it's great to have a great player. It's better to have a great player that's a great leader. And we had so many of them last year. And again, that's not something that's easy to coach. And it's something that it may happen quicker for others, but time is required. So right now we're trying to be patient, yet at the same time, when we play these games that you all mentioned against outside competition, trying to add a little sense of urgency, because much to, I think, all of our happiness, the season will be here before you know it.
Yeah, it absolutely will be. And I know you've said recently, it's like you're training like a UFC prize fighter in some ways over these next couple of months, really hitting the weight room hard and your strength and conditioning and all these off-season programs. Like, yeah, you might get a breather. The exhibition season is quote unquote over, but the work doesn't stop. I mean, this is where you separate yourself, pretender from contender. And you've got a couple of those guys, a couple of former Ole Miss players, and Liam Doyle and Andrew Fisher, who hit a tank in the exhibition against Western Kentucky this past weekend. Tell me about the new crop of newcomers, both transfers and, freshmen, that you're expecting to make a significant impact here early on. And, what rooms for growth might there be with the personnel that you currently have coming in ahead of 2025?
Yeah, Fish and Liam are a good start to things. And I think Fish originally had a lot of interest in our program. Almost maybe felt disrespected, but we just weren't able to get in there based on circumstances when he originally left school freshman year out of Duke. And then Liam, I think, had a high level of interest in being here and pitching with Coach Anderson. And we were kind of worried about another recruit, and it was a gross mistake on our part. So it's interesting how the road has been long and windy, but they both end up here as talented players. But Gavin Keelan from Louisville is just as talented and has been phenomenal for us with the bat, but is also a guy who could help move around guys on defense for us or fill another spot. Obviously second and third have been emptied. So he's pretty versatile, but he's a bat, that's going to help us in the lineup. And then there's a couple other pitchers too, because we lost so many innings over 400. We probably are as, strong in numbers or have as many arms as you'd like to have in the fall. It's kind of nice getting to play this many scrimmage innings, but somebody's going to have to emerge. And if anything, they should realize there are so many innings to gobble up by newcomers this year.
Yeah, and you've made reference to the fact that you're hoping to see leaders emerge in an earlier press conference you had, but you also said they don't necessarily have to be a captain. You said Peyton Manning, then you mentioned Tom Brady. Then you said, to hell with Tom Brady, because you got to give the ball legend some love. So, listen, as a Patriots fan myself, it hurts a little bit, but I understand from your perspective, you got to go with your volunteer guy. So, we'll certainly excited to see who steps up to be the leader in 2025 or leaders for this team in 2025. One of the guys that is now a different type of leader from a player to a coach, Kirby Connell, on your staff now as a quality control analyst. What's it been like having someone with not only his experience, but also a very unique personality and mustache be a member of your staff and help the next generation of volunteer baseball?
Yeah, no doubt. Well, to backtrack, Belichick and Coach Belichick, I should say, and Peyton Manning joining forces has got to be a little odd for all NFL fans. But hey, at the end of the day, when we're in street clothes, we should all be friends. Maybe not on a college football Saturday, but you know what I mean. But having Kirby around is one of those deals where just his presence makes everybody better. And then before we even get into baseball, with some of the other community service work we did, with the flood relief, he initiated things and he was a leader. Same thing, Children's Hospital last year, and that picked up this year. He's got an idea that he runs with, and the other players just jump on board, and it wouldn't happen without his leadership. And then, you're crazy as a young pitcher if you don't ask, hey, how did you pitch in all those, tense circumstances and kind of look like, hey, I got this at all times. And why were you one of the favorites of the coach? So the younger kids have an outlet that they can go to. And I know he's probably a lot easier to talk to for them than we are. But at the end of the day, it's Knoxville. It's his city. We're all living in it. And he is slowly making his way into the mayoral office. And then eventually, I got to believe Senate and other things are probably in his future. But he's a dang good coach, too.
Oh, that's amazing. We've talked about the clubhouse now a couple of different times, how loose it's been, the attitude, the personality that it's taken on. We use the word unique so easily, but that's been your team. Tell me about your approach and how all this has come together, because you've said before you're more of an old school guy. You hit a home run, you put your head down, you run the bases. But, this swagger that the Tennessee team has played with under your watch, and maybe, granted, dialed back maybe a little bit more slightly since that 22 team. I know there was more of a concerted effort to get down to business since then, but define that line for you pushing all of those buttons and empowering those guys in your locker room to be themselves, to play for each other, but to do it in a fun way where they love each other. What is that line, and how do you find the right buttons to push?
Sure. Well, dating back to the 22 team, since you brought it up, I mean, that team literally, you could argue, and no one truly knows, it's up to rule makers, but you could argue they were responsible for 3 or 4 rule changes just because of their presence. So you've seen college baseball adjust to some of the things that are going on. They just happen to be arguably the loudest group doing it. And, you talked about a redemption tour too. I would like to, my vocabulary leaves me reaching for a better word than that, but I think they validated the receipts from the 22 season and the 23 season, which started with a lot of struggles and kind of was like putting together a puzzle and finally making it to Omaha, which we didn't in 22. But if you combine the two, I think those 2 seasons more than any, we validated the receipts from those 2 years. And would not have been able to do what we did last year without it. I truly feel that way. And part of it is now a part of the answer that you talked about is people make a place. And I think the people here are appreciative of the support staff, because I kind of run around with like my head cut off, but there's so many people that are involved in our players' lives that truly take an interest in them as a person and as a player. And while it's a demanding environment, especially in the weight room, it is a loose environment. And it's one that I think even the oddest characters and some outcasts and some people that have been criticized for how they were in high school as a student or a teammate, I think those people have excelled here as much as anybody. And I can only speak from my personal point of view. My impression I try and put on it is I do feel like I outworked or tried to outwork everyone I played with. Part of that was because I wasn't very good. And there were so many days I put in a full day's work, or maybe even double the time that our starting shortstop put in, but I wasn't having fun. And, all of us got to make a living as adults, or prior to that, we've got a passion we're pursuing. And it just doesn't make sense, to not have fun when you're investing all that time. So I've joked, before that we want to lead the SEC in fun, but winning is fun. So there's a lot of different components to it. And so you talk about pushing buttons. I wish it was like the bass and the treble, and you could, in the midline, you could get it to exactly where you wanted. But a lot of it is just trial and error. And at the end of the day, if you've got good people that care about one another, you can kind of cover up some of the wrongdoings or some of the days that don't go as well as the other days.
Fascinating insight from national championship winning head coach of the Tennessee Volunteers, Tony Vitello, with us for a few more minutes on Dugouts, Dumbbells, and Dingers. You mentioned the SEC, a new SEC coming in with Oklahoma and Texas, 16 teams. You got your fixed opponents in Vanderbilt and Alabama to preserve those rivalries, those connections over the years, which will certainly be fun. Still 10 weekends in the SEC. $3 million per year salary, contract extension through 2029. Certainly Danny White giving you that exudes faith, stability, not just to you, the program, the fan base, all of those things. It's awesome, right? Richest contract in all of college baseball. But it also comes with stadium upgrades and a facelift. Yeah. How excited are you for where this program is? Now that you've got the first national championship in program history, you can move forward to selling to recruits, not just that, but the facilities and the stadium. And I know there's slight delays. It's not going to be completely finished until 2026, but there'll be some noticeable changes ahead of this upcoming season, nearly a $100 million project. How juiced are you for the changes that are to come to Lindsey Nelson Stadium?
Yeah, more than I can put into words, and more than anything, I'm juiced. You kind of turn that topic. It's talking stadiums a lot more comfortable than talking about other yes, dollars and cents, but it does all go into one pile. And I'll say this, a trivia question that I bet most, like you could ask Kyle Peterson or even Chris Burke, who is the most invested dollar-wise in college baseball in their program as a university? And it's Tennessee, and that's a fact. Obviously, it sounds like I'm recruiting you all, but if you throw in everything that involves resources and finances, we currently are the most invested in college baseball. And a lot of that is from the leadership. And you mentioned Danny White, who's a maniac when it comes to facilities and having finances in order and having structure. That's why right now, if you walk around our campus, it's half fun to have these recruits here, and it's half a headache because it's like loud and there's constructions, and step over that. It's excuse our progress, but also realize by the time you're a student in college, all this stuff's going to be done, and it's going to improve what is already one of the best universities in the country, especially when it comes to athletic departments. But, our chancellor, Donde, she is a superstar. You've seen her at baseball games. She loves baseball. And Randy Boyd, who's involved with baseball so much so that he's got a AA stadium being built downtown right now for the Cubs AA organization. It's all played a factor, and we're benefiting from it, whether it be our fan base or that leadership. And it is exciting to watch this stadium go up. There's finally some steel, and you see how high and how big this thing is going to be. It's going to help us in many, many different ways, and it's going to solidify that this is a true SEC baseball team, because you're going to need that certificate of authentication with Texas and OU joining this group.
Yeah, you certainly will, and you guys certainly have a lot on your ledger that's going to be attracting all these recruits. Of course, the national championship. You've got the football program success. You've got the stadium upgrades. You've already got the top-ranked class according to Perfect Game. And then just in the last week, the top player in Missouri, the class of 2026, and the top righty in the Volunteer State have made it official. They're coming to Rocky Top. You mentioned a little bit ago, though, Tony, that you want to lead the SEC in fun. Well, we like to lead this podcast with fun and at least leave it at the end. So we're going to ask you some fun, quick hitters, 5 more minutes with you. Appreciate the time here with us today. So we'll start with this. We heard you really love Chipotle. So we want to know the Tony Vitello order at Chipotle and why has a local Knoxville Chipotle not made you a celebrity order on the app yet?
I don't know. We order enough. I can tell you now the local one, which is, it's also it's branched off into, it's a franchise. It's in other spots, but Dos Bros is down the street. That's what our guys will be eating today. You bounce back and forth between that and Chipotle. I'm a basic guy. I mean, I'm looking for a chicken burrito bowl and, I wish I was a healthy athlete, but bring on the rice and beans. I don't need anything, cut out of that whole deal. And then, cheese and pico, and I'm ready to rock and roll. As long as you're going to throw in some chips and guac on the side, because I like to dip a little bit, kind of mix all that up. I don't need a fork when I got a chip, and the whole thing is satisfying every time around the block. Now, I will say this about Chipotle. Max Scherzer, who I had the good fortune of recruiting, I was technically in charge of his recruiting visit, which we're not allowed to speak about what all went on during that visit. But he did commit to be a Missouri Tiger, which is where I was at. His tenure was highlighted not on the baseball field, but with 3 Chipotle burritos eaten in one sitting. And he did pay the piper for that. But I kid you not, 3 full Chipotle burritos, one sitting, all taken down, not a bite left.
Oh, that's incredible. Who needs a fork when you have a chip, though? No wiser words I think have ever been spoken. Gotta have the guac as well. You played soccer when you were growing up in St. Louis, in addition to baseball. You even won a state championship, 1997. You still a soccer fan? Has there ever been any friendlies out at Lindsey Nelson Stadium or anywhere else on campus?
There's a few guys. Max Ferguson's a former player that fancied himself to be pretty good. So we'd kick, the baseball around. That doesn't move quite around like a soccer ball does, but I do enjoy watching our women's soccer team. They've had a ton of success since we've been here. One time over in Barcelona, I was able to watch, them play when Messi was still there. He broke the La Liga record. So I enjoy the game and appreciate it, but honestly, that's for every sport. I just like the competition and I like the camaraderie. And the one thing, that I really got out of soccer, it was a warmer sport that was a longer season in high school where my dad coached. So I was always following around as a little kid and then eventually as a player, and then even would come back when I was in college and even give speeches to those guys or just kind of be on the bench. That camaraderie I really enjoyed, and it kind of helped form what my opinions are on coaching, taking coaching, giving coaching, and then just the teammate aspects in general. So, yeah, I look back on those days with fond memories, even though I was made fun of for not playing football. But I was a late bloomer. I might not be sitting here if I was playing football at any level.
You've already mentioned you have a lack of athleticism. You played 2 sports and you're a state champion. Give yourself some credit, Tony.
Hey, basketball as well. We took down Jason Tatum's dad's senior year. We took down their team among us, a few others. So
fantastic. That's awesome. Hey, we'll close with this because you brought up your dad and your relationship with your dad, Greg. It's been well documented how incredible of an influence he's been on you, both personally and professionally. He mentioned once, though, that at a young age, even though he coached high school baseball by himself for 30 years, you, a young Tony Vitello, were his assistant coach, and you had no problem being candid about the players, even when they were your friends. Is that all true? And is that where you got the coaching bug?
Yeah, I think so. I just kind of followed in his footsteps, but then I also really enjoyed, he did a great job he did not interfere with the other coaches, because I did play a bunch of sports and you come growing up, and I think he set a good example that I wish was more prevalent today is hey, that guy is in charge of this particular situation. And as a younger, student / player, you need to listen to that individual. And that was the only involvement he had. So I was able to get close with a lot of other coaches and enjoy their leadership and maybe kind of take mental note of, I like that. I would do that if I was in his shoes. But ultimately, no better example than was my dad. And of course, I spent the most time around him. And so I had all these years built up. And even as a younger dude, I felt like I just wanted guys to do as well as they could do. And that's why we're all doing this. Kudos to you guys for pursuing the excellence you guys have with this deal. And then, of course, with all athletes, regardless of sport, whether it's cycling or anything else, you're probably doing it to challenge yourself a little bit. And so you might as well see what exactly is how well I can do it, or what is my ceiling, what's the best I can do. And if anything, I think I help people do that, and it kind of give you a good little buzz. And so you want to do it, a natural buzz, that is. and then you kind of want to do it a little bit more.
I think we all have the natural buzz after this conversation with head baseball coach Tony Vitello, the national champion Tennessee Volunteers. Thank you so much for joining us, Tony. It's been a blast these last 30 minutes. We'll hit up Sean to get that picture, okay, to share with us from the hotel. And maybe you can send us one, too, of the inside of that all-black Maserati that was on full display at the World Series parade, because I'd love to see how fully tricked out that thing is on the inside, okay?
I'll work on the second one, and when I send the first one, do not judge the hair.
We will not. We will not. Thank you so much, Tony. Best of luck this upcoming season.
Okay, thanks, guys. Enjoyed it. Appreciate you.